The river looked awake that night, black water shouldering past the banks as if the current had orders of its own, and the engineers who crouched in the reeds believed one thing with a near-religious certainty. If the enemy saw the span before dawn, the crossing died right there, along with the men queued on the far road, so they set out to make the river move without being seen, to conjure a bridge from darkness with smoke, sound, and nerve. It began with the weather officer's whisper that the wind would hold steady at 3 knots, a bare breath moving left to right across the floodplain, perfect for smoke to crawl and thicken, so the crews unpacked their generators, lit the pots, and watched pale clouds roll off the banks until the far tree line dissolved, and then, under that man-made fog, the first clatter of steel met the mud, panel after panel shouldered by men who couldn't afford a dropped pin, because one clang meant a flare, and one flare meant artillery. So every motion was rehearsed to muscle memory. Lift, slot, drive, check, while the current gnawed at their ankles and the bank tried to swallow each timber. The captain had split the force into 3 invisible hands: smoke in the wind, bridge on the rollers, noise on the far bend, because sound was as dangerous as light, and so the deception squad choreographed chaos where microphones would hear it. Trucks double-clutched in a copse of trees. Empty drums rattled in a ditch. A tracked vehicle idled and lurched, all timed to pull listening posts toward the wrong echo while the real work unfolded 50 yards downstream. The river, swollen from days of rain, argued with every section they launched, the nose of the bridge dipping, rising, and dipping again like a blinded animal testing each invisible step, and the sergeant running the rollers counted under his breath to keep panic away. 1 panel, 2 panel, pin, until the span grew long enough to sag under its own courage, at which point the men bolted on a sacrificial nose, a lighter frame angled up like a spear, so the bridge could reach toward the far bank without collapsing into the black water that pushed so hard it felt personal. Enemy flares finally clawed at the sky, thin claws of magnesium that barely scratched the smoke ceiling, and for a moment every man became a statue, with a heartbeat, listening for the artillery that usually followed. But only a few probing shells came down on the decoy sound to the north, thumping wet earth, and the captain let the breath out of his chest in a hiss that sounded like more smoke. When the span reached halfway, the current tried one last trick, curling along a submerged stump that hammered the side like a fist, and the bridge shuddered in a way that told the men they were either about to win or lose everything. So the divers, 2 kids who'd lied about their ages, slipped into the cold like knives and lashed a guide rope to the stump by touch alone, allowing the crew to walk the bridge a yard upstream with grunt and roller teamwork until the sag cleared, and then the nose-kissed mud on the far bank, a silent greeting, and the men on the rollers gave it one more heave until the angle settled and the lattice sat, where geometry said it should never sit on a night like this. They were not done. No bridge existed until it could bear weight, so the planking detail laid the roadway like a heartbeat, thock, 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 while the anchor party drove pickets and Titan guys that sang in the wind, and the signalman, soaked and shaking, keyed a single word across the net: walk, which brought forward the first test load, a truck straining in low gear with its tires whispering fear. And when it reached the crown, the span bowed the way a good span should, metal talking to metal, and then the truck rolled down the far side and vanished into the smoke with a tail light blink that looked like a star falling in reverse. Only then did the captain allow himself to light a cigarette, shielding the ember in his palm while the second vehicle, a half-track this time, began its crawl, and behind it, a file of men materialized out of fog, like history, deciding to happen, rifles slung, eyes wide, boots thudding in a rhythm that made the bridge seem alive. In the tree line, an enemy machine gun finally stitched the smoke with tracers, red lines groping for a target they could not see, and the deception squad answered with a stack of firecrackers and a recorded truck backfire, dragging the tracers back toward the Phantom Road while real trucks, fuel, ammo, a field kitchen that would serve hot coffee at 0200, flowed over steel that had not existed an hour before. Time stretched and snapped and stretched again until the sky went from coal to slate, and with the first hint of blue the smoke thinned into ghost ribs, and the shape of the span appeared to the far watchers, who must have wondered how a bridge grows in the night like a plant. And by then it was too late, because once a river admits a road exists, an army owns both banks. And so the engineers pulled their tools to their chests like exhausted children and listened to what they had made. A soft, endless clatter of crossings that sounded to them like victory. They would not be named in the dispatches that morning, and no statue would hold a smoke pot in a town square, but if anyone asked how the river moved, the men would say it didn't, the river stayed, and they moved the night, bent it with fog and false thunder and 100 quiet decisions until geometry surrendered, and a bridge that shouldn't have worked simply did.